Good afternoon, everybody. Hi. Hello, everybody. We're going to get started now. I'll just start talking. So, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ruth Stevens. Is that okay? My name is Ruth Stevens, and I'm honored to be a member of the board of BIIA. Is that better? Delighted to be here at this conference, and I'm particularly happy that the subject for our luncheon talk is privacy, or as we say in Hong Kong, privacy. And I wanted to just to mention that privacy has actually been with us as in the data world for a long time. I personally ran into it the first time when I was working at Time Warner's Book of the Month Club division, and I had occasion to see the book purchasing behavior of our new candidate for the United States presidency, namely Bill Clinton, who was a member of Book of the Month Club. And I thought long and hard about whether the kinds of books that Bill was buying from Book of the Month Club should be something that, for casual conversation. And I remembered the experience that Robert Bork, anybody familiar with Robert Bork? He had been the candidate for the Supreme Court. He was a professor of law at Yale, and an enterprising journalist in around 1987 went down to his local New Haven video store and found out what videos the Bork family had been renting recently and made that public, and that resulted in the Video Privacy Protection Act of 1988, and gave all of us in business some pause about the importance of keeping our consumers' behavior to ourselves. So on that subject, I'm delighted that we have with us today Fatemeh Khatibloo from Forrester. Fatemeh is a very well-respected analyst in the area of consumer insight, privacy, and so forth. And she's also a bit of a so-called media darling, meaning she has been widely quoted in very well-respected publications like the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, CNN, NPR, the BBC, and even the Harvard Business Review. She's been at Forrester for 5 years, and before that, I'm happy to note that she, like me, was in the mail order business as a marketer. So with that, let's hear what Fatemeh has to tell us about the importance of privacy today. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Got a mic that's skewed. Clear. I was going to say, this is protecting my privacy, right? You can't hear me if it's pointed down. Can you hear me all right? Can the folks in the back hear me? No. All right, so we need to, how do I keep this? And tweeting them right now.
Just take it off and put it in your hand.
Yeah, maybe I'll do that. I'll just hold it. I can just hold it.
Like a wedding singer.
Yeah, you can walk around.
I can just hold it. Okay, is that better? All right, excellent. Well, thank you for having me. It's very, very exciting to be here and talk about a topic that is very near and dear to my heart. I think you'll find that the next 30 minutes or so will be focused on a slightly different perspective than what you've been hearing about for the last day and a half. I'm going to bring you the consumer perspective on privacy, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how people, individuals, you and I, when we're not wearing our business hats, think about privacy, think about our data, think about the way that companies are using our data. Now, the majority of business leaders that I work with have this perspective. They're so worried about losing competitive advantage, about losing competitive opportunity, that we've created a mindset of data hoarding. So we hoover up all the data that we can, we stick it in databases, and we hope for the best. We think that someday we might be able to use that data, and we protect it to the best of our ability, reasonably well, and sometimes that doesn't work very well. At the same time, we have this terrible situation in consumer data privacy and consumer security. So the average individual today is logged on to 80 or more apps and websites at a time. She uses only an average of about 5.5 passwords, which means that she's sharing those passwords across 6 to 20 websites and mobile applications. This is really bad for privacy and security. Now, it turns out that 4% of our website logins actually result in a reset, a password reset. But most consumers don't reset their password to something strong. They just reuse a password that they have on another website, one of those other 4 passwords that they use. Now, the media is very, very quick to shine a light on all of the privacy and security problems that we've created as a result of these two sides of the problem. Everything from true privacy breaches and privacy infractions. In this case, TomTom, the GPS manufacturer, inadvertently sold data from its GPS devices to an Amsterdam police authority who set up speed traps throughout Amsterdam. Consumers were understandably outraged. To Facebook's ongoing privacy problems. I mean, it seems like every other week we see a new Facebook privacy infraction. And most recently, we see the breach of TalkTalk. And this is ongoing ramifications and implications for not just TalkTalk, but ultimately the entire mobile industry, the entire mobile carrier industry. As long as I've been in privacy, these media stories have been coming out on a near weekly basis. And that means that ultimately, we've created an environment where consumers don't trust us. I find it tragic that only 55% of consumers trust their banks to keep their personal information safe. This is not the way that business should be. As a result, consumers are actually doing things to protect their data. Now, in Asia, I think sometimes we think, well, APAC doesn't have the same privacy attentions that Europe and that North America do, that consumers aren't taking as many steps as some of the North American consumers have. Turns out that's not true. I actually dug into some of our Asia-Pacific research to try to understand a little bit about consumer behaviors. Turns out that 40% of Chinese consumers are using security and privacy applications on their mobile devices, that 22% of Chinese consumers are using a do not track browser tool. And this is different from turning do not track on in your browser, because this is a piece of code that sits in your browser and actually blocks tracking. 28% of Indian and Chinese consumers are using ad blocking tools, which is a problem if you're a publisher. And 26% of Indian consumers are actually looking at privacy policies before they make purchases. And it's factoring in their decision-making process. So these consumers are increasingly savvy, and these numbers have gone up quite dramatically since we first started asking them in 2012. So these numbers are going up, consumers are becoming more savvy, and things are really changing. Now, my thesis is that companies' approach to privacy until now has mostly been wrong. I mean, you can see here, I know this text is pretty small, but in the top 2 bars, most companies, 93% and 77%, fund privacy primarily from a compliance and regulatory protection perspective. It's so that they don't get in trouble, right? But what if the paradigm changed? And it is starting to. 26% of businesses invest in privacy as a competitive differentiator. Now that number is up from 18% 3 years ago in our research. And this is really significant because it means that a quarter of companies understand and recognize that privacy means something to their customers and that they can actually drive competitive advantage by being on the right side of privacy. So at Forrester, we have this hypothesis that there are actually two reasons to do privacy better and to change your privacy practices. The first, of course, is fear. And this is sort of the carrot and stick model, right? Regulation is absolutely coming. We've already heard about the European data protection regulation. We know that Russia is changing its privacy regulation. All over APAC, there's new privacy regulation on the table, on the books. These infractions, when they happen, will cost a small fortune. Bad privacy causes public relations headaches. I already showed you evidence of that. White hat developers, and the term that I heard earlier, the kid, I tweeted this and I can't remember what they're called now, but these developers and hacktivists who are out actively trying to expose and unearth privacy and security infractions are out there and incredibly active. And bad privacy can literally cost your CEO his or her job. Target's CEO stepped down as a result of the security breach that they had. The board demanded his job. So, okay, there's a lot of really good reasons to do privacy there, right? But mostly people don't follow the stick model, the punitive model until they have to. But I believe that there's actually a better reason to do privacy better, and that's actually for competitive advantage. Privacy lets businesses actually attract more customers. Think about Apple today. With their most recent iOS update, they have really upped the ante on all of their privacy protections. Tim Cook has come out publicly talking about how important privacy is to Apple and differentiating on privacy by saying Apple is a company that does not sell or monetize user data. They're putting a stake in the ground to say if you care about privacy, Apple is your mobile platform. Better privacy also lets companies create more personalized services. So in the US, I know there's not quite as much Mint adoption in APAC and Europe, but in the US, there are millions, tens of millions of users of Mint, which is a personal financial management software. Similarly, TripIt, which is a place for you to aggregate all of your travel information, travel bookings. Now, the interesting thing about these companies is that they are they're asking their consumers, their users, to trust them with massive amounts of data. In the case of Mint, it's every username and password that I use for my financial accounts. In the case of TripIt, it's all of my travel history. It's all of my future travel plans. Now, if these companies got privacy wrong, and if they were seen to be misusing my data, their products would be gone. They would have nothing to sell. By protecting my privacy, they actually create more personalization, better experiences for me. Now we're also starting to see some really interesting cases where companies that do privacy well and invest in privacy are actually creating privacy-enhanced services and charging more money for them. So I know a lot of people will say, why is Google up on this screen talking about good privacy? But Google has actually created a product called Contributor, and it's in beta. And for spending between $3 and $10 or $3 and $15 US per month, you can actually limit the amount of data that is shared with you to advertisers and completely reduce the amount of advertising that you see within Google. This is significant. AT&T has created a tier of its home internet services, which for an extra $29 a month US, you actually have no data tracking done on you. They limit and block data tracking within the service. And finally, companies that do privacy well can actually start to productize it. So AVG is a desktop security software, similar to Norton, similar to Symantec. And AVG bought a company called PrivacyFix a few years ago. And this is a privacy dashboard, and it lets their customers on the fly in a very, very simple dashboard see where their data is going, how their data is being used, and whether their privacy protections are set to a minimum level that they're comfortable with. Now, this isn't easy, and we don't really have a great definition for what privacy should be and what good privacy should look like. So we've sort of created one at Forrester, and we call it contextual privacy. And I'll just read this very quickly. We believe that it's a business practice where all of the collection and use of consumer data, of personal data, is consensual, so your customer knows it's happening. It's got a mutually agreed upon context for a mutually agreed upon purpose. And so this means that the value exchange to your customers is really clear. The value exchange when you and I as individuals give up or share our data is very clear to us. And we believe that the calculus for contextual privacy is quite simple. Consumers actually get value in exchange for the data that they're sharing and that they're giving up, and they actually have some control over that value, what it means to them. And that leads to more trust and more willingness to share more data. And then businesses actually assume less risk and create business opportunities. So we talked a little bit about the risk aspect of it, but the business opportunity here is massive. When we talk about personalized services, personalized recommendations, personalized products, we can only get to this place if our customers trust us with their data and if we use their data in a way that provides them value. Now, most companies that I work with have pretty big privacy teams or security teams, but these teams are in legal, they're in IT, they're in compliance. Very few business partners actually interact from a privacy perspective. And this is a problem because contextual privacy, the way that we've defined it, has to be a collaboration between business leaders and IT leaders. The marketing and business leaders are the folks that are providing the insights about the customers, using the data to deliver the insights and understand the changing customer attitudes. See what's happening on the website, in e-commerce. If customers are increasingly blocking access to data, how do we fix that? The business actually helps to identify what some of the revenue generating opportunities might be if the business does privacy well. These are the folks who actually change what the data use practices are, limiting working with certain ad brokers, for example, certain media companies if they don't like the way that media company is working, limiting the amount of trackers on their websites. And then, of course, these are the folks who communicate with consumers about data protection, data collection, data use practices. On the other side of the aisle, we have business technology leaders. And these are the folks who really have to understand how to capitalize on changing global privacy requirements. So they're the security and risk folks. These are the folks who actually build privacy engineering and operationalize privacy throughout the organization, protecting data, managing data, disposing of data, having data retention policies that limit how much data is exposed. And finally, these are the folks who effectively fund the privacy initiatives, the technology to help us do contextual privacy better. So I hope you'll agree with me that privacy and contextual privacy is really an enterprise-wide initiative. It has to be. The 5 steps to making it happen are to establish a privacy organization. And again, this is across the aisle. This is IT, this is marketing, this is product development, it's business leadership, and there has to be an executive sponsor for your privacy organization. You have to start uncovering the business opportunities for your organizations when it comes to doing better privacy. Operationalizing and engineering for privacy. This means that the technology teams are helping to define the code, helping to write the code, helping to protect the data, and the marketing and business leaders are following the processes, writing governance, writing policies that are both internal and external facing, customer facing, and ensuring the business processes are in place to execute against the practice. We have to plan the technology investments that are required for better privacy. Most companies don't have investment, don't have budgets for better privacy. They have it for security and compliance, but not for privacy as a competitive differentiator. And finally, you need metrics for success. So that initial team that is the privacy organization needs to develop metrics and KPIs that help them measure on the success of the privacy practice. But you're probably sitting around saying, why should we do this today? Why does this matter? Well, first of all, your customers are getting more sophisticated. All consumers, irrespective of geography, are getting more sophisticated. They are acting on their privacy concerns. They will continue to vote with their wallets, and they will adopt the technologies that make data protection and data privacy easier for them. The companies that learn how to do privacy better will be able to monetize their customer data better, and those that can't won't. They will stagnate. And ultimately, companies that fail to protect customer data and customer privacy will perish. Thank you very much for your time. So I think we have time for a couple of questions. Is that true? Yes.
Hi, very insightful presentation. Thank you. You talk about the setup of a privacy organization is very important. You also mentioned about the measure of success and KPIs. Can you give us some specific examples that some of the companies are using as measure of success?
Sure.
Thank you.
So we talk a lot about privacy audits. And privacy audits and the maturity of an organization with respect to its data privacy and data protection audits are one of the key metrics that our clients use. And there are some companies that will do data privacy audits, but there is also technology. And that technology will sit on your servers, behind your firewalls, and run scans across all of your systems, and really provide a dashboard, a report card for where your data is passing. We also really like the idea of some of the companies that are out there that try to infiltrate your business. I think quite often we forget how valuable a white hat security analyst can be. And so having somebody out on the other side of your business trying to infiltrate, trying to figure out where your weak spots are is another great way to set up some KPIs and metrics. And finally, I think we really like to see the operationalization of privacy at the business level. And so this means actually having an organization where you do privacy training across the entire company. And when you do privacy training and you actually do privacy quizzes and tests, you get another set of metrics about how well the privacy organization is educating the rest of the company. Good question.
For companies, it's very important for them to operationalize the whole privacy issue. But do you think that governments in general are able to operationalize it as well? And is there consistency across different governments as to how to protect the consumers or businesses in terms of privacy concerns?
That's a really great question, and the short answer is no. I think ultimately what we're seeing is a very fear-based regulatory environment. I think even in the US, for example, I live in California, and California has just passed, or just enacted, a right to be forgotten for minors law. Now, that's really, it's great in some ways because minors should be able to, but the minute that law has gone into effect, now there are adults demanding the same thing. If California passes that law, the rest of the US will have to follow suit, irrespective of whether there's a federal law or not. There's no company that can afford not to do business in California. Similarly, in some of the Asian markets, we see almost no privacy regulation at all. And it's sort of, the Wild West, a frontier where any company can do anything with consumer data, individual user data. So I think there's no consistency. I also think that we won't see consistency. I think what will end up being driven by, there will be some markets where data openness will be a competitive differentiator, but I think that ultimately we're going to be fighting, as businesses, we're going to be fighting with government regulators that have very different rules, very different expectations, and very different intentions for their regulations. For as long as I'm doing this, I suspect that'll be the case.
We're having that fight already with the regulators.
Yeah, exactly. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you so much, and I'll let you guys get back to your desserts.